mic check. Hope you guys can hear me. I'm going to turn on my camera for a while, just to do a quick intro. Hi to all of you. Before I actually get started, and jumping into it, I think there's something that is really cool that I want to share, especially if you are in the space of giving presentations and all that. I think you'll find this very interesting. Disclaimer, parting my voice. I'm coming down some cold, but then I'm okay.
Not
So
COVID.
no, COVID.
Okay.
I was
No
going to have to
COVID.
throw that out there, so I have to interject. It's not COVID. I had it already. You will survive.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm gonna quickly share my screen, and then I would actually share this cool thing that I think would be helpful to most of us who do a lot of presentations, and especially when you have people on the go that might find it quite difficult, maybe joining the entire thing, or maybe you're trying to reach different sets of people. So we're going to do something real quick before we come to the actual event. So let's do um, portal. Let's go to portal.office.com. Now, I don't know if you've heard this, but it has to do with a live presentation that Microsoft has incorporated into um, PowerPoint, especially PowerPoint Online, that allows you to share your presentation and then also have people follow along, and then kind of like give comments and all that, and also give you feedback, and also actually translate it in multiple languages. So I'm going to share that quickly, and then we'll actually go on with
I'm
today's
so
session.
excited for this, Sam. I saw the update from PowerPoint, with the live meetings, with the whole QR code and all that. I think
Yeah.
this is so amazing. The fact that PowerPoint now is becoming an immersive experience.
Yeah,
Whoever
exactly.
thought PowerPoint would, take that next step?
Yep. And I was blown away. I was like, this is something. It's next generation. It kind of like puts everything in one space. No one is left behind, and especially in this time of COVID, this is really good for us, to work with. The only thing is that you need to make sure that the PowerPoint presentation has to be in a OneDrive, for business that can be accessed. Because what happens is that it actually shares a copy of the file to all the participants and allows them to follow along with you. So in this case, I have mine open, and I'm just going to use today's slide as an example. I'll just run through it quickly, and then we can come back to that. So now, when you're ready to go with this, just make sure you have the slide selected, and then you go to slideshow, and then give it just a sec, and we should see live presentation, present live come up. Now, so I'm just going to go ahead and say anyone. You can also be specific with it, so you can see built-in security as well. If you're doing this and you just want to be accessible to people in your organization, you can use this. But because we are from different orgs, I'm just going to go with anyone. And so if you would follow along with me, this will be very interesting. So the moment I go with present live, what's going to happen? Yes, I'm going to allow my microphone. So it's going to give us this QR code. If you can see it, you can scan it, or you can actually go to HTTP and then use the URL on the top right. So which is ppt.ms/ and this is the unique
I'm gonna try it.
unique ID for this particular presentation. So HTTP whack whack, all that, and then just ppt.ms/ this. Now, if you realize one person has joined, now what happens is that I'm also going to use my phone to join the fun.
I'm
The more
literally
the
watching your
merrier.
transcript.
Exactly.
This,
So for those of you who have already connected, you should realize that that's exactly. So I'm seeing people already giving the reactions. You should see also a closed caption of what I'm saying. And if anyone speaks any other language, you realize that there's also a section for you to pick the language you want to see this in. So if you
wow.
pick the language, you can change it to, Spanish, German, Filipino, Greek, Haitian, Hebrew, Hindi, Indonesian, Italian, Japanese, Korean, Latvian. The list just goes on and on. So you can actually pick whichever language you want, and you should see closed captioning happening. What I'm saying is being transcribed for you to see. Now, yeah, we have a lot of people. About 9. Yep. I'll leave this on for a while, but then think about this for people that Now we are global. COVID has given us this opportunity to go even way beyond our imagination, which means that now whatever event you're doing, whatever program you're doing, and you hope to reach the rest of the world, you need to be mindful of the limitations and restrictions other people have in other parts of the world, which in most cases is data. So there are people that might not be able to stream with you or even watch join a call with you. However, they might have enough bandwidth to follow along with this option. So with that said, I'm just going to start the presentation, and you realize that um, you should see you can follow along with me as I progress through the slide. The cool thing is that if I'm going too fast, right, there is actually you have the option to go back to the previous slide, look at what I said, and then you also have the opportunity, to click on the current slide to join where we are, as of now. So this is my very first step, not necessarily related to what we're doing, what we're going to talk about today, but then I just felt that it was really cool and interesting to share this. Now, the cool thing about this is once this is done, right? Once this is done, you have the ability to send your feedback, about the presenters, skills, the slides, all that information. You can send that to the presenter, and this is, reported to the presenter in their emails. Now, what happens is that as a presenter, this gives you insight to, what people think of how you do your presentations, and that goes a long way to help, to fine tune, to actually how do you call it, to if you need to work on the presentations, if we're setting portions of your presentation people were not too fond of, you can go back, work on those sections of your presentations, and then we move on. So that is the very first thing I wanted to share. So hope it was something useful, and all of you really liked it.
That's
Can I
huge.
give you a
That's
quick
such a cool feature.
debrief? You did fantastic. Take a deep breath. That is fantastic stuff. I have not seen that before, but I hope the group, you guys really enjoyed it because that is something that I've never seen before. So keep on
I
going.
give you 5 stars, Sam, on your presentation.
Yeah. That is what we want. Thank you very much. Okay, so let's go to today's yeah, let's go
Do you
and
want to
get
give a quick
started.
introduction of yourself, Sam, and just
Yeah, yeah.
MVP, just kind of your background? I think it's worth sharing.
Yeah, I'm going to do that. So I have that in a slide, so I was just going
Okay,
to get
cool.
that going and then hit it. So yep, we're going to be talking about Azure Static Web Apps. We're going to look at the 50 million, thousand whatever it is feet of it. We're going to get just to understand the core basics of it and see how we can follow along to do some very cool stuff. So to the meat of today's session, let me get this out of the way. So my name is Samuel Adranyi. I am an MVP on the Microsoft Azure category. I'm a senior software engineer at Andela, which is an African, I would say, talent hub that seeks to promote African developers and grow a really huge and highly skilled African tech ecosystem. I also run my own consultancy called QUOTA Solutions. We do most of IoT, AI, cloud stuff. I'm a solutions architect in those areas. I'm also a community lead here in Ghana, the Accra .NET user group, and also the Azure community, and then the Power Platform user group. I stream 3 times in a week. I actually had a stream earlier today on IoT. So on Tuesdays, I do IoT Tuesdays, which talks about IoT, everything IoT, and specifically how to use it on the Microsoft Azure cloud. Then on Fridays, I do what we call the Demystify technology series. I actually started this series back in Portland. It seeks to demystify everything you need to understand on the Microsoft Azure stack and other technologies. And then on Sundays, I host the Power Series show where I invite all the Power addicts to come and share some cool stuff, with us. And it's really an interesting one. I also have a weekly podcast that seeks to motivate and encourage young people coming into technology by interviewing people that have made it in the various tech spaces, their challenges, failures, how they went, how they survived, and all that. So fun fact, I used to live in Beaverton, Oregon. Yes, 97008. And I also used to be a co-organizer for the Portland Azure user group. So there is a lot of, this is like,
Yes.
so this is like home away from home. So I'm really honored to have you guys today for us to go through this. And anytime at all you feel like you need me to do something, please reach out. As right now we are very global. Geographical location it's is not a problem any longer, thanks to the positive side of COVID. And so those are my social media handles. You can connect with me at any time. I'm a night owl. As you can see, it's 12:25 a.m.
Oh my
Wednesday
God.
morning here in Accra. But for the sake of community and for the love of what we do, I'm here. So just reach out to me and we can have some.
Thank you, Sam. I don't know how you do it. You do so much, and it is just absolutely amazing. I've been following your content for a while, and you just really take it to the next level all the time. So thanks.
Thank you so much as well. The community is a motivation, and I want to use this opportunity to give a huge shout out to Joe Dan. Because and I'm this is really frank, honest, and because Joe was the one that really encouraged me. Joe was the one that really kind of like pushed me and was there to support me, to give me all the the guidance to get into community work, and I've come this far. So I owe most of my community stuff to Joe. He's an amazing guy. So please, let's give it up for Joe. He does a
That's
great
awesome.
community. Yeah.
Love Joe. Joe's such a great guy.
So, with that out of the way, so what are we going to talk about today? We'll be looking at the story on a high level, some key features. We'll talk about use cases. We'll take a look at the quota, and then we'll look at some API support, and then we will dive into some demos and how to set up your local development to use it. I'll share some resources, and then we can have some Q&A, and hopefully I'll be able to answer the questions. If I'm not able to, I'll always take it to the group, um, and then we'll get answers for you as we move on. So I'm going to start with a story. So as developers or engineers or solution providers, we always want to create different types of solutions, especially web applications. We always begin with writing that beautiful application that forms our code. The next logical thing we do is that we want to keep that code, want to push that code somewhere so that it becomes available to people across the world. And the next thing we do is obviously GitHub is one of the very common and very known repositories. So we push all our code to GitHub. Now, what happens, because we want to make sure that any continuous change we make, any things we add to it should reflect as part of the changes we're doing, we set up CI/CD pipelines, right? And then use, in the case of GitHub, like actions. Now, with that said, at some point in time, we want to be able to add some dynamic functionality to our site, like accessing data, like connecting to other services, and that is where we come with an API as well to be created as part of the solutions we are doing. Now, with that said, we come up with multiple APIs and multiple endpoints that at some point in the application lifecycle, we want to create routes that allow us, move from one space to another. And then with that, you also want to have a situation whereby you don't want the solution to just be a non-secured application. In this modern era, security is a huge thing. So you think about SSL, custom domains, authentication, roles, and who can access that. And finally, one of the biggest things is that you want your application to perform, and therefore you want it to be globally available. Now, to sum this whole thing up, that is what Azure Static Website gives us. It takes a traditional way of developing applications, adds actions, packages it, and allow us to create applications that are global scale set. So if you look at the diagram I'm showing right now, quite simple. Create your code, push it into GitHub, add actions to it. The static content are built into a global CDN that makes your application, globally accessible. And then you have the ability to create endpoints or APIs using Azure Functions. Now, I don't know if most of you are familiar with the term Jamstack, now, which is JavaScript, APIs, and markup. For some time now, it's become kind of like a paradigm. And there are a lot of reasons why people are going Jamstack lately. a couple of things is that it is fast and secure. And I can explain a couple of those things. For instance, all your static content, HTML, JavaScript, CSS, technically do not change, and that is why we call them static content. I know the first time I heard about static, web app or static content, I was like, wait a minute. I thought we're moving away from building static websites to building dynamic websites. I mean, that was the moment, I was just scratching my head. But come to think of it, even in our dynamic website, the core markup and structure and content of our and JavaScript and this do not change. It is only the data portions of our web applications that change. And hence, it just made sense for us to, relook and rethink the approach of building web applications. Hence, static websites, or if you heard the term, Jamstack. So fast in the sense that if you're building a static website, and also in the case of the Azure Static Web Apps, all your static content, HTML, JavaScript, CSS, are actually globally distributed in a CDN. So which means out of the box, you are building a solution that is globally accessible and rapid to access. Now, again, we talk about security. Now, why is it so key? Now, you've built an application at this point that doesn't interact directly with a database or a backend service, and this, takes away the headache of having an application that is directly talking to a database that is prone to attacks, man in the middle attacks, SQL injections, and all that. In this case, you reduce the footprint for attack. So these are some of the reasons why people are moving into the paradigm of doing Jamstack, or what we call static websites. So things like Gatsby, Hugo, all these things are there. Static website generators are there to help us build the next generation apps. Now, if you're familiar with modern web application development, npm run is a very common thing. You run npm run, you build your artifacts, and then you push them into some repository somewhere for people to access. So that is what Azure has taken and then made it into a solution that is easy to scale. So from their own words, they'll say that is the Azure Static Web App is a service that automatically builds and deploy your full stack. And here, full stack in the sense that you could use, Angular, React, Svelte, Vue, anything. You're not restricted to your full stack solutions. You're not restricted to that. So you use this full stack solutions to build web apps and then deploy them in GitHub with actions, and it's scaled for you in Azure. So that is the high level of what Azure Static Web Apps are. Now, let's take a look at some of the key features that Azure Static Web App gives us. Now, web hosting. Now, like I mentioned, for static content like your HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and images, you get this for free. It's part of the service. Integrated API support, like I mentioned, you can build your APIs using Azure Functions. There are some constraints which I'll talk about in the subsequent slides. Now, it gives you access to first-party Git integration. And yeah, I know a couple of you are asking, well, what happened to Azure DevOps? Well, for now, it's supporting GitHub Actions as a first-class integration service. Now, globally distributed, like I mentioned, you get your static content being put on CDNs closer to your users, which means if you build static web apps, it's much faster and much performant as compared to other things else. If you're building a conventional web app, you need to have your skill set, different regions, and put in, countermeasures to enable that. You also get a free SSL as part of your deployment, and which is automatically renewed for you. You also get custom domains. You can go, buy a custom domain somewhere with a GoDaddy, Namecheap, or even from Azure itself, and then use it in your static website, all handled for you. Now, it also gives you seamless security module in the sense that it creates a reverse proxy whilst you're calling the APIs. And what this does is that it takes away the need to configure calls. It handles all that for you. So, because if you've been doing web development and API, calls is one of the things that can really get you racking your head for a very long time. It also has authentication providers integrated. So as of now, you can use Azure Active Directory, Facebook, Google, GitHub, and Twitter authentication as part of the out of the box options you get. You can also customize authorization roles. You can define them and assign people to specific routes they have access to. You also have access to the backend routing rules, which means they allow you to, have full control over the content and the routes that have to serve them. And last but not the least, it allows you to generate staging versions of your application. So what you always know how to do, you create your pull request, you make changes and all that, and that is integrated into the pipeline or the flow. Let's look at some use
Hey,
cases.
Sam, quick question.
Yeah,
We had a
sure.
question come up. Can you explain the customizable authorization role a little further?
Yes. So with a customizable authorization rule definition means that you can actually determine who has access to what route. By default, if you can create different rules. It's not just based on the pre-baked rules that are defined within the authentication providers. You can add your own kind of rules for which people to use. So for instance, if assuming, let's say, administrator and let's say reader, just for an example,
Yeah.
administrator and reader are the only options available in, let's say, Azure AD or Google or GitHub. You have the option to add something like viewer to customize that option, to further refine the authorization rules you want. So that's what the customizable authorization rule definition means.
Does it go to the data level as well? Like, for instance, like based on that role, they can only see this data or they can only access these.
Yes.
That's pretty awesome. The fact that they're moving that to the actual, just the authentication piece. So
Exactly.
yeah, that's great.
Exactly. I mean, and all this, and the cool thing is that all this thing is actually defined by a JSON template. I mean, nothing really. I mean, if you've been doing web development for a long time, authentication authorization can be a pain. Can really be a pain to figure it out. So these are some of the things you get out of the box if you start to use the Azure Static Web Apps. I just hope it's becoming interesting for some of us, because the first time I saw it, I was like, "Well, this makes it, takes it to a different level." Let's really take a look at some use
and before
cases.
you get going to the next page, can like people chat in? If you have questions, please do jump in. He's given a lot of great content, so let's just jump in and ask questions as you need to. And I'm sorry about jumping, cutting you off there.
No, that's fine. I want it to be very interactive. Even if it's interactive, the more it's exciting for us, so we can learn. It's good to pause, explain things, and we move on. So feel free to jump in and let me know. I can explain further. All right, so let's talk about some use cases. So to build, publish, deploy, you can use them in different areas. So first of all, you can use it to build modern JavaScript applications. I mentioned that you don't need to learn a new stack. Continue to use the Angular if that's what you want. Use React if that's what you want. Use Svelte if that's what you want. Use Vue if that's what you want. And then, connect them with APIs built on Azure Functions. Now, if you're already into the static web, web application paradigm, you can publish your static sites with frameworks like Gatsby, Hugo, VuePress. It's supported. You can publish them into Azure Static Web Apps. And then also you can also deploy with web application frameworks like Next and Node. So if you're already in the static, web application space, these are very common tools and frameworks you can use, and Azure Static Web Apps supports that. So let's take a look at a QUOTA. These are things you need to take into consideration. As of now, don't forget that it's in public preview, and as of now, not recommended to for you to put it in production. But in the coming months, it's going to go GA with a lot more features. They're still working on a few things. But however, it's good to test and even build some non-production workloads. I have a couple of non-production workloads with it, and it's working really well. I can give you a total reason why I like it so far. Now, if you've been using functions for some time now, you know that some of the features or benefits of functions is that it is micro billing, right? So which means if my API is not executed, I don't pay anything. Now, think about that. Micro billing added to having your static content freely deployed on a CDN globally available. So technically, the cost of running an application in a static web app is much cheaper as compared to other modules which you deploy your web application. So for me, that's a win-win. So for now, in the preview state, you get up to 100 gig per month of included bandwidth. Your overall, bandwidth is technically not metered in this case. You have up to 10 apps per subscription, and your app size is 100 megs. You have one pre-production environment and you have access to one custom domain. Authorizations a maximum of 25 end users invited and assigned roles. So you can have this for now. And then Azure Functions is available for you to use. At this point, they don't provide any SLAs because it's still in preview. So SLAs are going to come in once they go GA. Now, so I'm sure most of you are wondering, well, you've been talking about the API. What of the API support? Now, the Azure Static Web, apps provide serverless API endpoints using Azure Functions. So it leverages Azure Functions. APIs are dynamically scaled based on like the demand. So if you're already into functioning as a service or the serverless architecture, adding it to your static web apps is just another plus. So as of now, the API support, there's integrated security with direct access to user authentication role-based. I mentioned that. There's seamless routing that makes the API route available to web apps securely without requiring the custom calls. That's the reverse proxy thing that is happening for you. And then as of now, it supports Azure Functions v3, and which is compatible with Node.js version 12 plus. Now, and also for now in preview, it only supports the HTTP trigger and output binding. So if you're familiar with functions, as of now, it only supports the HTTP, which is very, if you ask me, is very logical and normal. But I know in the future they are working on actually adding bindings for Cosmos DB, bindings for all the other Azure services. So your static web apps are even going to be more powerful and have more cooler functions. These are the constraints to take note of when you're using the APIs. So first of all, the API route prefix must be, all your API routes must be prefixed with API. It's kind of like a convention thing right now. I'm sure in the future something might. So it means that whichever endpoint you create has to be prefixed with API. Now, the API functions app must be in JavaScript. Yes, so for now, it is only JavaScript and TypeScript, which is transpiled to JavaScript, that is accepted. So for now, but I know there's a way to allow other supported languages and functions to be used. Now, also, all your route rules for API functions would only support redirect and secure routes with roles. And also, your triggers and bindings are limited. I mentioned this before, limited to only HTTP. And if you want to have logs, just enable application insight on your functions app, and then you get logging in it. Are there any questions for now? Because I think I am done talking. I want to just jump into some demos.
Don't be afraid, people.
So if there's any question, I would take that before we jump into the demo. In the demo, I'll try to get us to build our first app and then add an API to it. And then I'll walk through how you can set up your local development. Even though most of the things I'll be doing is already from the my local development, I'll just still throw more light on it. If you've not used functions, if you've not been using functions locally, this requires you to have set up your environment as if you're running Azure Functions. That allows you to run functions locally. It's built upon that. So with that, and since from now, till the end of my presentation is just going to be the demo, I think I should just for now show the resources I have, resources I want to share with you guys, so that once I jump into the demos, it's just we don't have to worry about the slides again, because obviously my slides are all done for now. So first of all is the Microsoft documentations, and if you've been following Microsoft for some time now, you should realize that the documentation has got a whole new facelift, cool stuff. It's very easy to follow, very detailed, and gives you a lot of information. And then also Microsoft Learn, awesome content. There's actually a whole learning part on doing this there, so check that out. aka.msSWA, which is for static web apps frameworks. You should be able to get the content. And if you are publishing from Gatsby, there's also kind of like a tutorial step by step for you to do that. Now, so what we're going to do is that we're going to mix the Q&A with the demos that I'm doing. So as I'm talking through doing the demos, if you have any questions, you can ask me, and then I'll try to answer that. So that's the end of my submission. But now let's go have some fun with demos. And feel free to ask the question as I am going on. Awesome. So let me bring this here. Let's bring So I'm going to bring my Azure. So like I mentioned, when you want to build it, because Azure Static Web Apps is using the concept of what we do naturally. When you're building a solution, the first thing that you know that comes to mind, or the first thing that you do is that you just create your solution, or you have your repo, you create your solution in the repo, you create your code, you work on your code, and you push it. So we're going to see this same flow, and then we're going to move on and creating adding our APIs to it. So I'm going to start with a very basic, creating a very quick starter. Now, if you go through the docs, you should see that there are like very simple sample steps for us. So I'm going to go to this URL. I'm going to share that in the. Let me move this here in the chat side so that I can share that with you guys. Okay, there you go. Let me move this here. Yep. So what Microsoft has done is that they have actually, and let me know if it's zoomed in enough. I can actually get this more closer to you guys. Okay, awesome. So what Microsoft has done is that they provided us with like a base template that we can use, to start our building of our solutions. Now I'm going with in this case, I'm not going with any frameworks. So I'm just going with a pure vanilla application so we can see how this works. So let me call this Portland Azure user group. Let's call this static app. So what I'm doing is I'm just creating a repository that's going to, pulling pulling some sample application that Microsoft has provided. And it's a public repo. So after this, you can go check it out and then, mess around with it. So let's say, let's call this Portland Azure user group static website demo. All right. And then I'll just create the repository. And yep, there you go. So while the repository is created, now, so what happens is that the Azure Static website needs you should have at least one file in it. So if you look at this, it's very minimal. It's just a file with a CSS, README, and an HTML file. Very, very basic. Nothing complicated. Very, very basic steps. So here, the next thing as developers, assuming that we have created this repo, we want to start working on it. So let's go ahead. I'm going to copy this, and then I'm going to go to. I love the new Windows terminal. If you don't have it, please check it out. It's awesome, very, very awesome. So I'm going to create a new PowerShell here. That's a cool thing. I can actually create instances of Ubuntu, Debian, Azure Cloud right from one. So that's a cool thing to check out. Okay, so let's do this. So here. I have a location where I keep all this, my dev stuff, and let's go ahead and then, so let's git clone. Yeah, so we're doing this quite simple. Now, so this, you're just going through the regular process of building, your application and, putting in a repository. Same thing, nothing different here. So here, I can go ahead and go to Portland Azure user group, static web app. Did I make anything? Okay, let's do this. Let's check this. Where is the? Oh yeah. Okay, so let's do static app. I put a web there without them, and I have a cool. I have some cool plugins that let me see that I am in the master branch of this. Really cool. I think Scott Hanselman has a blog post on how to do this. Check that out. So in here, as you can see, this is very bare bone, minimal, simple workload that has index, README, HTML. That's just it. All right. Now the next thing we're going to do is that once you've created your code, the next thing you do now is to go ahead and create a static web app in Azure and then deploy it. So just so we get a good environment, a much friendly environment to working, I'm going to move into Visual Studio Code. And as you can see, Let me bring this up a bit so it's much clearer. Awesome. So as you can see, very simple HTML page, nothing. So all I'm trying to do is I'm trying to give you the very bare minimum, then we can work on this. So very basic, nothing crazy here. Very, very basic. All right. So let's go here. Now we're going to go into our Azure portal. So let's go to portal.azure.com and feel free to ask me any questions. I would be honored to answer it. Let's use this account.
We have such a quiet audience today.
Yeah.
I wish we were in person. I could just prod everybody, but yeah, I get it.
Yeah, I mean, feel free to interject and ask me questions. I'll be more than glad to to answer that. So hey, I can understand when people are, I mean, if you're trying to watch this and get it really really well, that's also fine. Yeah, we'll give you feedback later on. So let me also zoom this in to give you a good look. As you can see, I have a couple of resources going. So let's go create our resource, and then go ahead and do, once you even start typing something like static, you can see static web app preview here. There you go. And then we're going to create this. So before that, if we came back to our code right here, all right, if we came back to our code right here, this is just basic HTML. That something just going to output vanilla JavaScript app, something very simple, right? Nothing crazy. So let's go and then check this out. So here I'm going to pick my subscription. I'm going to create a new resource group, and I'll call this Portland Azure user group. Okay, and then the name. So let's call this Portland Azure user group. Yeah, let's call this static app. And the region. So again, I don't know if you're aware of it. Let me show you this tool. Azure there's another one. Yep, this one, and then there's this one. I'm going to copy the URL. Oh no, I think this is the same thing. Just a sec. Yeah, this is what I was looking for. Cool. So I'm going to put this also in the chat. Now, this is a very cool tool that allows you to see, in terms of Azure regions, ones with the lowest latency. So if you look at it right now,
That is amazing.
so if
I
you
had
look
no
at it
idea.
right, yeah, I know, right? Sometimes you wonder, well, which one, which region is closest to me that gives me the least latency. So I have realized that for me, especially in Ghana, France Central seems to be between West Europe and France Central are the ones with the least latency. So I use this to determine where I'm going to put it. So I'm all going ahead to put it. Where's that? Yeah, West Europe is here. And then for now is a free SKU. So there you go. Now the next part here, if you look down closely, is to sign into your GitHub, because what's going to happen is that when you create the Azure static web app, what happens is that it initiates the GitHub actions once you point to the repo, because what you've done needs to be built and converted to static content for it to be globally distributed. So let's go and sign in. I've already signed into my GitHub, so that should sign me in. And then select my organization. Yeah, let's use my Adranyi organization, as that is where I cloned it into. And then let's go ahead, and I think this is it, the Park Static app. And it's going to ask me for the branch. Now, whether if you're using a mono repo, you have to be specific on which of the the folders or the branches to use. But in our case, we only have one branch, which is the master. So if you look closely, we only have a master branch with this. So we're good to go. So I select that, and then we go to next build. Now, this is quite critical in the sense that depending on the framework you're using, now if you're using Angular, if you're using Svelte, React, they might have specific folder conventions as to where the app is, and then where the APIs sometimes it might be in public API, or maybe it might just be API or something else, or sometimes in functions. So you have to be mindful of this. But because we are using vanilla JavaScript, this is fine being the root, and then we'll later come and add an API folder and then add APIs to our function. So the artifact now, so if you're dealing again with Angular and other frameworks, usually in this distribution or public/distribution, you also need to provide this, but in our case this looks fine. We're not using any framework, so bare bone simple stuff. We're not adding any tags, so I can go ahead and review. Let's check this out to make sure that we have everything in. Yep, everything looks good here, so I'm going to go ahead and click on create. So what this is doing for us in the background is that it's creating our flows, sorry, our GitHub actions. It is spinning up all the resources we need, and it looks like that is done. So let's refresh this and see. Yep. Okay, let me go here and go to, so it says that this is done, deployment succeeded. Let's go to the resource. Now, it's deployed it for us. However, it is still probably building the actions and all that. So if you look at this top notification here, when you click this, this takes us to our repo, and then as you can see, it's taking us to the actions. And if you look at this right now, we have it queued. So we're just waiting for this to build. Now, the moment this builds and is successfully deployed, when we come back to application, and it gives us a URL. Now, as you can see, this is Lively Sunday, so it tries to create some Slack, some random Slack for you to give your app some interesting names. So whilst we wait for this to be deployed, let me refresh this and see that, once it's done, it would have a tick, and then we know that it's deployed. So you just have to wait for the first build, for the first action to be built and deployed, and then we can go to this URL and then see our app in action. And that is how you create your very first basic static web app. From here, we're going to try to add an API or create a different as an API, and then we can see how we can use our Azure Functions to do this. And that is where it's very important to set up your local development, because when you're using Azure Functions, sometimes you'd want the ability to test your functions before you push them into Microsoft Azure. So let's see how. Okay, so this is done, as you can see, with a tick mark. And then so let's go back here, and then if I just click this, open this in a new tab, and check this out, vanilla JavaScript app simply deployed. Now this is your very first Azure Static Web App. Now, to prove to you how easy it is to build from, make changes and move to it, we're going to just make some simple changes. So let's come in here to Visual Studio Code, and instead of saying vanilla JavaScript, let's just add a few things. Let's do this. Let's say Portland Azure user group rocks. And yeah, I can add something here and say,
hell yeah, it does.
I miss you guys. All right.
Do you really miss us?
Oh yeah, I do. I miss the Portland rain,
Really?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Initially when I came there, I was like, oh, it rains too much, and I just didn't want to be in it. Now I'm out of it. I'm like, man, I miss that rain, but it's just something for another day.
Yeah.
So we just made some changes, and just as a reminder, so there's no magic happening. This is what we have now. As you can see, Lively Sand. This is the name of our, So let's go ahead, and then yep, let's come back to Visual Studio Code. So I've made this change, and if you have the whole GitHub workflow, I'm going to go in there and then add added, or let's say changed app title, right? I just did this, so save this, and then let's push this, right? So this is pushed now, because when we created the static web apps, it created okay. Yep, let's do this. Let's sync this. So let's do a pull and pull. Okay. So when we created the static web app, it created the actions for us. So right now, which means that anytime it detects a change on our master branch, all right, it is automatically going to start another build process to push it. So let's go here and see what's happening. So let's refresh this. A new thing should have been, yep, there you go. Look at that. As you can see, it's kicked off another build because it detected a change in the branch, in the master branch. So this is how, and this is how cool it is. Now you can actually go ahead and create more configuration or setting to say that you want to branch off. You can create a pull request. When that branches in, when that is merged into the master branch, it's also automatically going to build. So again, let's just wait for this to build, and once that is done, vanilla JavaScript app should change and should go into what we have specified that to be. So let's patiently wait for that to, let's see. So waiting for that tick. Sometimes I also notice that sometimes because of latency, it actually has deployed or built, but then it takes a while for GitHub to to update itself with that. So just something I just noticed, but I like to play the devil's advocate and just give it some time to completely tell me that it's done, and then we can move into it. So yep, that's done. And moment of truth, I'm going to refresh this. And whoops, there you go, Park Rocks. We made that change.
Yeah, baby.
So look at this, workflow right from GitHub or your code base into GitHub into what? Static Web Apps. Now, this is not, this is not fun enough, right? So let's create something that is going to consume our API, all right? So let's go with it. And now, and for that, you need to have set up your environment to allow you to run Azure Functions. It's critical. It's core of what you need to do. So to do this, again, I'm going to get a new repository. We can actually build off this, but for the sakes of time and getting stuff done, we're going to use a new repository to do that. So let's go here. And again, so let's do Poland Azure user group. We'll call this API app. And then also public, so you can go play around with that and create the repository. And we're going to go through the same flow, the same flow of you having your application and you making all the changes that that you want. All right. So, yep. And as you can see, almost the same thing here, right? Index, readme, nothing, nothing crazy about it. All right. So, why don't we just go ahead and change that? Okay. So let's go here. I'm going to copy this. So we clone that into our workspace. Okay, so let's go back into my dev and let's do git clone. By cloning this into its own folder. Very simple. And then let's go ahead, follow Azure user group API app. And then let's code into it. Thank God for Visual Studio Code. So again, as you can see, quite simple. So I see a question. When you make a change, changes saved to GitHub and then static web apps will changes. Yes, exactly. What happens is that the changes are saved in GitHub and then the static app pulls that into Azure for you. Yep. You're absolutely correct. All right, awesome. So now that we have, if you look at this, this is just almost the same as the very first one we created. All right. However, now we are ready to add our API. We want this application, to make a call to the API. Because we've already, I think let's do this. Because we've already started with the first one, let me just go ahead and let's use this, right? So that we can see the changes progress. Cool. Let's do that. Okay, so with this, what I'm going to do now is you remember we mentioned that if you're deploying it, when you deploy it and you want to have API, you specify the folder which has your API. So in our case, if you remember, we specify for the app that APIs are going to be kept in the API folder. So I'm going to go here and create a folder called API because that's where I want all my APIs to live in. Now, here is where you need to have set up your environment to work with Azure Functions local development. You need to install the Azure Functions locals, the Azure Functions CLI, install the extension in Visual Studio Code, and then you can actually run Azure Functions locally. You can actually test it locally before pushing into Azure. So with this, what I'm going to do is that with the folder selected, all right. So I'm going to do Control-Shift-P if you're on a Windows, and then type Azure Function, all right, and then create a new project right here. Click on that, and I have series of presentations of functions. So Greg, let me know maybe at another time if the people are interested. We can do something on Azure Functions, because that's like a very cool.
Love that. Would love that.
So yeah, definitely. So I'm available. So all right. So let's go in here. We want to put this the folder will contain your functions project. So let's browse this. It's going to be in my API. So that's where. All right. That's the API folder. And then the language, remember, as of now, we're supporting JavaScript. So we do JavaScript. And then remember also for now is HTTP triggers. So we select this one. And then what name do we give to this one? Let's see. Let's call this get. Let's call this get message, right? And then for security authorization for the function, for now, let's go to anonymous. And like I mentioned, if you guys are interested, I can create. We can have another presentation on functions, and I can talk about all these levels. Yeah. Now, as you can see, what has just happened is that it has created our functions project here. So there you go. Functions.json defines the function for us, and then index defines that function. So this is a very basic function that just responds hello with, if you call this function, responds with a name. Now, if I want to test this function, because I have the Azure function, how do you call it, runtime installed, I can test this simply by just hitting F5 on my keyboard, and this is going to just start, building going to call the Azure Functions runtime locally, and it's just going to build it for me. As you can see, it's building in. There you go, and then it's going to expose that function to a particular endpoint locally. So let's see. Yeah, signal R is already there. Hopefully this doesn't crash on me. So let's see. Okay, what's this saying? Connect debug because okay, let's see. Let's
Don't you
open
love
this.
errors during demos? It's like that's only when they happen.
I know,
Literally.
right? It's crazy. Let me try this. Let's see. Let's do 8082. Let's see if we can just move it here. And then let's try to restart this again. Save this, close this, and let me go to my functions. Let's just make sure I'm in the function and then just hit F5. One thing I also notice is that if it starts misbehaving this way, sometimes I have to reload my how do you call it, my Visual Studio Code, and then there you go. So that works fine. So now if you look closely, check this out. The get message function which we just created is exposed on this spot onto this URL here. So if I should bring in a new tab here, and then let's go to that endpoint. There you go, right? But then if I go ahead and do name equals Samuel, check that out. Hello Samuel, this is being triggered from a function. So this is like a very basic function, right? Which at this point I'm not testing it in Azure. I've not deployed this function in Azure in any which ways. I'm just testing this locally, so I can make the changes, check all that before pushing into Azure. So that is that side. Okay, so
That's
with that done, yeah, and trust me, this is a lifesaver because most times when you have, a whole development team working on, some APIs or some microservices, and you want to rapidly test before you deploy, this really helps. So if you haven't checked that out, please check the Azure resources, especially on functions and how to set up your local environment. It's really, really, really useful. All right, cool. Okay, so let's go here. Let's see, what terminals do we have? Okay, sometimes these terminals seem, once they lock up with your script, you are done. All right, cool. So at this point, we've created a very base function that we need, but this is not what we want the function to output. All right, we want the function to output something, cooler. So we're going to change the code base or the content of this function. So I'm just going to do something very simple. I'm going to cheat here. I'm going to copy a simple code, and I'm going to replace everything in here with that. All right. And let's see what's telling me. I have all these pretty and all these cool things going on for me. So here, if we should run this function again, right, hitting F5 as always, just to test the changes we've done, this should go ahead and just anytime we call it, just send us some JSON response with something very simple. So if we go back here, let me just copy this. And you can also use Postman to test this. So don't feel that you are only limited to this. So let's go ahead and do this. And as you can see, returns very simple, right? So at this point, we have our API, all right, our Azure function outputting this for us, right? Isn't that cool? Very awesome and powerful API. But that's not the entire thing we're looking for. Now, what we want to do is that we want to update our. Let's go ahead into our function, and let's make sure that, let's check this out. We have this. Okay, let's go ahead and check this out. So we know it's anonymous. We have it as a, HTTP trigger. It's an int. It's a request. Now, we don't want to do a post to this particular one. It's only going to be a get. So I'm just going to go ahead and then take this out. So our function just supports, just a get. It's just another way to, keep it secure. So we've run our API locally. This is working perfectly. Now, the next thing we're going to do is that we're going to do a little change. And this is required because it makes it easy for our application to access it. So when we deploy this, request is going to be made automatically or routed to the functions. All right, but we need to tell the function also where to find it, and I'll explain this shortly. So let me go ahead into my VS Code, and then let's go all the way into settings, and in here I am going to add a line of code, and then so right after here, let's go here, and then I'm going to add this. Okay. Now let me explain what's happening here. Now when we run the application, okay, now we're going to be making calls to you. If you remember, all APIs are supposed to start with the base /API. Now at this point, this particular static web application we've created doesn't know where API is. It has no idea of where API is. All right. So what we are doing is that, especially for testing purposes, we are telling it that anytime we're just creating a live server route to say that anytime you see a route or a base, anything coming from /API, this is where you can get it. And if you remember, if we should go back to let's do this, running our where's that? Let me just go back here to get that. Now you see this endpoint, localhost 7071. All right, API. This is it. This is where our function is hosted locally, and that is what we are trying to tell the settings here. right? That's what we're trying to tell it. So either you use this, or I can just go ahead and say, go to this side. Let's take this out of here. All right, and say this is the proxy for it. All right, so localhost. Let's do this. Let me just change this to. Yep. So we're just telling it that anytime you see anything coming from a /API, this is where to find that particular. This is the route or the URL to find that endpoint. So that's all we've done here, and this allows us for us to locally proxy it and test it as we're building the application. So with this done, we need to also make a few changes to our HTML so that we can actually start consuming that endpoint. So let's do this. Let's come here to our HTML, and then here I am going to also borrow some code for the sake of time. So park rocks, we have that, and then I'm going to bringing a very copy code here. So loading content from the API, and then let's go ahead and use strong here, and then the ID name, that the element name is name. So that's cool. And now I'm going to copy one more script. I'm going to borrow a script, and then so this is plain, and I'm just doing plain JavaScript here. All right. So if you're doing things like React or Angular, you used to go with just your way to build it. I'm just going with a vanilla way of doing it. Now, so here we're just creating an IFI, that just runs when our simple web application runs, and we are getting the text from our API. Now you see this here. This is it. This is what we actually set up here to say that anytime you see a /API, go here. All right. Yep. I think there's one more thing I needed to add here that it would have actually resulted in an error, but I'll leave that to error out, and then we'll fix the problem. So let's go to our index page. Yep, here, there we go. Simple, and that's just about it. So by using the fetch API to call this and get messages, convert this, all right, to JSON, and then if you look at this, we're just picking this and then outputting the content of text. And if you look closely, text is what we define in our function here. The bodies, we define it to be text. So it's going to pick this value, right, for us. Hello from the API. Developed by Azure user group. Awesome. Okay, so let's save this. Now we've done a lot of changes. Again, basically go through the same process, put in the comments, and then now you've seen that a couple of files have been added. So here at this point, I can do a git ignore and ignore all these other stuff. But let's go back and fix the problem I was talking about. Now, if you look at this, if you look here, it's calling API/message. All right. Now, at this point, our system knows of, okay, if you say API, I know I need to go here. But what about the routes of message, right? We need to define that in our function. And to do this, we can actually add the route option to our functions configuration. So after the method, we come here, we put this here, and then we want a route, and then we want to call this what? Message. So it means that we've given this particular function a route of message. So you can actually reach this function by going to the message route, and then you have access to this. So that is the magic we have to just do. Let's go back here, and let's say added an API, and then check this in, right? So now we've made that. I've not yet pushed it, but we need to test it to be sure that this is working, perfectly. So to do this, two things have to happen, right? So first of all, what we need to do is that we need to first of all, we need to run our server. Okay, write M5 to run our function, and then we can now run our application itself. So let's go into the function here, press F5. Ensure that our API is working, and then And also there is I'm going to use a plugin, sorry, an extension that allows you to browse applications when you're building them in Visual Studio. So let's go ahead and check out our endpoint. Let's be sure that it's working perfectly. So if I refresh this, no, let's go back here. Now check this out. Now look closely. You realize that now because I added the route, you can see API/message. And now this is what I get. So now this route has been defined. So we're going to leave this route to run in the background. Then I'm going to come here in my HTML, just testing it. And then I'm going to go ahead, Control-Shift-P on a Windows. And then I'm going to look for live server, and I'm going to say open with live server. Now what this going to do is it's going to open a browser, all right, and then just show. Now check that out. Do you see what just happened? We've called a function, an Azure function, and then it's being fetched into our application. So locally we can tell that our application is working. So this is a static website that is calling an API developed in Azure Functions. Now with this, all we need to do now is to make sure that we have created we've just pushed this into into GitHub, and then it's going to go ahead and create all that for us. So let's check this out. We know that it's working locally. I'm going to leave this running. Actually, let's just stop this. So we stop the local running of this, and then we go here. Let's stop the running of this as well. Awesome. Cool. So now GitHub, we made changes. I'm going to go here, and then I'll just sync this so it does a push and a pull. It pushes stuff into Azure for us. Sorry, GitHub for us. Now let's go back to GitHub and then take a look at what's happening. So I'm going to refresh, and now check this out. We've created another build process that's happening. At this point, this is all we have. This is all we have for our web application, our static web app as of now. Poland Azure User Group rocks, and I miss you guys. Now, let's see after the build. We've now added an API to our static web apps, and then we can go ahead and be creative with the API and all that. And we can create, we can be as creative as we want with it. So let's see how this goes. So let's wait for this. Refresh this. Now, once it's going, you can ask me any questions at this point. We are nearing our the end of our demo, but I'll be glad to answer any other questions that pop up. But let's just ding, keep it cross, wait for this to deploy, and let's see our function in action. And at this point, I have been testing everything locally. And that is the advantage of setting up a local environment. So you can test your static apps, you can test your functions, you can test everything locally before you push it into Azure. So no cost to be incurred there. Now, if you even want to connect to a data source and then maybe Cosmos or anything with your application, I don't know if you know about them. Here, this is let me just try to open this one. Yeah. So if you don't know about the Azure Cosmos DB emulator, allows you to emulate Cosmos DB locally on your machine, so you can test Cosmos DB locally as well. So cool stuff to watch out for. So the Azure Static App is used to get actions to pull the web pages and an API from 2 different Git repos. So it doesn't. Okay, so app is deployed. So it doesn't actually pull it from 2 repos. So what's happening is that your entire content now, your entire repo is in GitHub, right? And then it is using convention. So if you remember when we're creating the static web app on Azure, we specified where our functions, where our API was. In this case, we said that it's going to be in the folder API. So what happens is that Azure by convention is going to look for any folder called API in your repo or in your branch, and then it knows that is an Azure function, and then go ahead to spin up Azure Functions app, and then spin up all the necessary resources needed to run that function and tie it to application. So now, moment of truth, drum roll. Hopefully, goals of demo day are favorable to me. Let's refresh, and yep, check that out. We have our function running with an API. This time, it's running live in Azure. This is not local anymore. If I let me actually let me run my Zoom it too, so I can actually go in there for you guys to see. So if you look closely here, this is not local anymore. This is deployed into Azure, right? And then it's the same thing we've seen here, right? Isn't that awesome? I think this is cool. Now the good thing is I'm sure someone will be asking, can I do my node packages? Can I do all that? Yes, you can actually do it. And I'm going to show you let's go. I'm going to show you an application for the sake of time. One that I did that actually, I think this is the vanilla static one. This one actually has yeah, there you go. So this one I used I used the node module, and I used the faker library, the node faker library, to create this thing. So anytime you reload it, it generates like a fake a fake thing for you. We can actually check that out here. So if we go to the environment, there we go. So let's browse this. Yeah. So you can use your node modules if you, and I'm sure once they bring in support for C# and all that, you can also use NuGet packages. So that is how to create a static web app, and then also to create an API and then invoke that API from your static app. I hope this has been very useful, and you find a lot of good stuff to do with this. Any questions at this point?
That was awesome.
How are we doing with time? I was just
We're
trying
good.
to. Okay. I was
So,
thinking
yeah,
maybe.
if we want to open up to questions, or if you want to show some more things.
Yeah, I was trying to see maybe if we could try to do the custom domain. I've not bought any domains, but so disclaimer, I've not done this. I have not bought any domains, so this would be like a complete new experience for us. So let's try this out. Let's go here and let's do a static app here. So this is how you would go ahead, if you wanted to add custom domains. Now, but before then, let me zoom in and show you something. So you realize that after we deployed it, check this out. If we go to functions and refresh, check that out. The get message function is right here. So I can come back to my local development, keep adding functions, do whatever I want to do. All right. And then I can now expose this function into my application, right? So I can create as many functions as I want. And then once I publish, I push it to GitHub, it's going to reflect for me. Now for environment. So you are allowed to create, just like you have staging environment, like you can have a production environment and a staging environment. You can do the same thing here as well. So you can create multiple environments that allow you to separate your production code from your testing code. Now this is what I was talking about in terms of role management. As of now, we've not implemented any rule or security here, but if we did, I could come here and invite people specifically and give them access to different routes in the static application. So it's just a matter of hitting invite. What form of authentication do you want them to use? All right, whether you want them to use Azure Active Directory, GitHub, Facebook, Twitter. So the good thing is that Microsoft handles all this for you. So once you do this, a person tries to access the application, they'll go through the whole pop-up login flow. It's handled for you. You don't have to worry about that. That's handled for you. So let's say if it's going to be GitHub, select GitHub, the person's handle. All right, that's my handle. And then the domain you want. So if you have multiple domains in there, this is the application you want them to access. And then here, the role. Now, so this is what we talked about, the custom roles. So I can put in any role here. I can say Poland Azure user group role. All right. And then in my code, when I'm creating my route and then authorizations, I can say that before you access this route, you need to have the Poland Azure user group role. If you don't have this role, you will not be allowed to access the route and anything that comes with it. So this happens for you, this is like very simple to set up. And then here you can determine how long that person, has access. And then I can go ahead and click generate, and that has been, done. So I can now copy this particular link, send to whoever I want to send it to, and then when the person tries to access it, they will be required to do logging with GitHub before they get access. So even if we should try this right now, because I'm already logged on, so look at that. So I need to grant consent. So all this happens So all this happens for you. So let's go ahead and say grant consent, and consent granted, and now I have access to the app. Now with this, it creates something called the system folder that allows me to get access to the email and the claims that the authentication provider gives me. So things like email and other stuff like that I can get from here. So that is how easy and simple it is to create the authentication. And then so you can export this as an ARM template as well, and then make use of. Now configuration. If you've used functions or any app service before, this is where you can create things like environmental variables, right? And then you can access them within your code. So you come here, add, and then you add the value, the name, and then the value and all that, so that you can now use like process.env, or depending on any other language you're using, and access this environmental variable. So things like keys, secret keys, tokens, and all that, you can use, set them in the configuration. So I think we still have time. Let's try it now. Let's see if we can add a custom domain to this. So I'm just going to create. Let's go to add, and then do I have a custom domain here? So if I wanted to use a custom domain, I would need to create a CNAME record with this, with a domain provider, wherever I bought the domain from, and then specify the name of that custom domain, and then what? Validate it. Once this is validated, I can now, my app will now change and use that custom domain. All right. So yeah, because I've not bought that, it's just quite straightforward to do that. So I think at this point, that's all I have for you. Creating your first Azure static app, and then creating an API to connect with it. Any questions?
Can we get a round of applause for Sam? I mean, this guy does not sleep. All he does is just eat, breathe Azure. I mean,
You did a great job, buddy. Did a great job.
thanks, Sam.
Yeah, and then oh yeah, before that, if you will permit me to share something, yes, I need to do this.
Yeah, please do.
Production, like mentioning, I need to do this.
Yeah.
So actually today my time, well, tomorrow your time, I'm actually speaking. What's that?
Yeah, it hasn't come up just yet.
Okay, hopefully. So I'm actually part of the speakers for the powerful DevConf. So so yeah, I'll be talking about IoT and the Power Platform. So you want to watch out for that. I don't know why this is not
Do you have
showing.
links or something you can share in the chat?
Yes.
Or?
Yes. I'm going to share that. So I think it's aka.ms/ powerful devsconf. Yep. So I don't know why, but okay, let's see. Let's see if this
As I said,
opens.
if you're demoing, it's gonna screw up. So
It's man, it's crazy. I think I'm just going to stop sharing first, and maybe open it again and see if that works. Oh yeah, that works. And then let me probably share that again. Yep.
Sure.
And hopefully you see that. Yeah. So I'll be speaking tomorrow, and I'll be talking about IoT and the Power Platform. Yep. So make a date with me on that, and I think I can actually, let's see. I can actually, for the sakes of those on the call, I can actually cheat just a little. So let me know if
Oh, sweet.
my image has, if you look at my video, not the screen share. If you look at my video, so what I'll be demoing tomorrow is I have this set up already. So there's a Raspberry Pi. There's it's a 240 volt fan. There's a relay here. There's actually a DHT 12 humidity and temperature sensor right here. Yep, here. There you go. Now this is actually connected to Azure IoT Hubs, and then I'll be using Power Apps, Power Automate to control it on tomorrow's session. So make a day with me, and then you can probably. And then
can you tweet on it so I can share it? Like that
oh,
is
yeah,
amazing.
sure.
I had no idea Power Apps can go to the device level like that. What? Actually, I did. I guess I didn't know it could do the IoT hub.
Yeah,
I know you can do like functions on devices like your phones or your tablets.
Yeah.
The fact that you can go to, even like an enterprise machine kind of like that is amazing.
Yep. So yeah. So thank you guys. Now I'm open to answering any questions that you might have. Yep.
Feel free to jump
Press
off
next
mute.
show.
If you're wondering how Sam does it all in 24 hours, I want to know.
Hey,
Yeah.
hi. My name's Hal. I'm curious. Is there if you have like a build step or a dist where you like want to minify all your static assets, is there a provision for handling that?
Yes, you can actually do that. I think I should probably just go back. I'm just going to share my screen real quick and then show that. Let's open this and let me share the screen. Yeah, let me know if you can see my screen.
Yep.
All right, so what happens is that you realize that as you're creating the solution, it added a GitHub workflow here. So if you look at this, it's a simple YAML file. So you can come here and look at that. You can define any of the steps, minification, anything you want to do, you can define it here, and then it works for you. So yes, you can actually inject your own process into this.
This is Ted with CSG. Just from a solution architecture perspective, I'm trying to picture where this fits into, regular kind of quote unquote regular server side SPA applications that you might build and host on your own app service. So what would be the case for going with quote unquote static web apps over a traditional SPA application deployed through app service? And are there any like tables that kind of list like here's why you would choose static web apps? I mean, there's some obvious things. If you just have static content and you want it deployed super quick, it's obviously going to be hosted in a CDN that can be globalized. All those things are stand out. Some of the ease of customizing the authorization and the roles, I can see that. But if we're looking at what resources are there to help, if you're looking at a solution that somebody wants and it's not going to be a very heavily trafficked website, or you need that kind of really quick CDN response for the content, but you might need some more traditional, real heavy API backend that's going to be hitting a database. How would are there resources to help you figure out how you would decide to go with the static web app versus a traditional SPA application hosted on an app service?
Yeah, so there isn't any official table out yet, but I can, and that's not the NDA, so I can share that. So that's in the works. So that's in the works coming. But on the high level, what I can, like you rightly said, in terms of global distribution and all that, if you also look at the cost implications, you're running over APIs that are connected by Azure Functions, and if you've done functions, you know that cost of running functions is way cheaper. Now, that is one thing we want to do. I also mentioned earlier on in terms of security. Now, if you're following the Jamstack paradigm, right? If you're following the Jamstack paradigm, you also realize that one of the key reasons why now static apps are getting a lot of attention is the fact that they kind of like isolate or reduce the footprint for attacks, because they don't themselves have that access directly to, let's say, the databases or backend services that someone would be interested in hacking or attacking. So that is one thing. But again, from an architectural standpoint, like you rightly said, if I'm looking at deploying maybe a highly scalable or highly available solution really rapidly and fast with minimum downtime, yes, I would go for static web apps. Even though mentioning at this point, not for production yet, but in the future, obviously, that will be a candidate, for deploying a highly available solution. Now, if you're comparing it with regular app service, cost is one thing. The first thing is cost, and then the second thing that jumps out for me is just the development cycle. Yes, you can build your own CI/CD with web apps, but if you look at the flexibility that static web apps gives you, it has that advantage over the regular app service. So these would be the two things that stand out. But I know there's a table in the works that will outline a lot of these things and make it much clearer for you.
So if your REST endpoints hit any other endpoints that required an OAuth flow to authenticate and get data, somehow the security footprint is reduced.
Yes.
Okay, could you explain that a little bit?
So if you're following the Jamstack paradigm, so this is what's happening. So for traditional, let's say for traditional apps, right? You're building, most of it is almost closely coupled. Oh, there's a backend service
Yes,
that's
yes, I understand
connected.
that.
So yeah, so because of that close coupling, it makes it, you know, a lucrative target. You know what? I want to hit this service or this app and try to breach or have access to, you know, the services or whatever it's happening in the backend. But
Right.
in terms of a static, you know, static web app, everything is compiled and and made into static content. So there isn't anything happening in there apart from the service requests that the application itself does to the APIs. So at that point, you reduce the vector, you know, the surface area for attack. So that is what we mean by makes it, you know, less prone to, you know, attacks than the conventional applications.
Because of the distributed nature of the architecture.
Exactly. Yeah. And then
Okay.
it's not closely coupled in this case. It's not, you know, tightly coupled.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else with some good questions? I know, Sam, you probably want to get some sleep tonight. So if we can, give you another round of applause and just say thank you so much for going so deep,
Thank you.
answering everybody's questions, and really fostering this growing community we have around Azure user group. Josh, I don't know, do you have any words you want to add? Josh?
I'm off mute. Thank you so much. It was actually, it was a great presentation. I really appreciate you taking that extra step and going a little bit extra and giving up the people an extra view of what you're going to be doing tomorrow. It was fantastic. And I actually want to get that link so I can join tomorrow.
Sure.
Sweet. Well, Sam, thanks again. Have a great evening. Hope to have you back. Maybe do some Azure Functions. You know, we're trying to do this every other month, so you'll get an email from me. So thanks everybody for joining. Hope to see everybody in September, and see y'all then.